Hey guys, tonight you're slipping into a world where the Nile shimmers under a silver moon. Its waters weaving through a desert, so still you can almost hear the stars breathing. Imagine yourself standing on the riverbank, your feet sinking into soft, cool mud, the air thick with the scent of lotus flowers and distant date palms. Across the water, a temple glows faintly, its sandstone walls flickering with torchlight, whispering tales of gods and kings. This is ancient Egypt, a land of pharaohs, pyramids, and secrets etched in stone. Get ready for a gentle journey through its golden sands. But let's be real, you probably wouldn't last a day here, dodging crocodiles and baking under a sun that doesn't quit. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm curious, where are you tuning in from tonight? What's the time in your part of the world? Drop it in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step closer to the Nile, its ripples catching the moonlight like scattered jewels. And the modern world fades away. No notifications, no car horns, just the quiet lapping of water and the distant croak of a frog. The Nile is Egypt's heartbeat, a lifeline that nourishes fields, villages, and dreams in a land hemmed by endless sand. Around 3100 BCE, King Menes united Upper and Lower Egypt, creating a kingdom that thrived for over 3 millennia. That's tonight's mainstream fact. Menes, sometimes called Nama, laid the foundation for one of history's longest-lasting civilizations. But here's something less known. Egyptians didn't call their home Egypt, they named it Kemet, the Black Land, for the dark, fertile soil the Nile's floods gifted them each year, a name that sang of gratitude for their river's embrace. You tilt your head back, and the sky unfurls like a velvet scroll, studded with stars so bright they seem close enough to touch. The Egyptians didn't just admire these lights, they studied them, using constellations to time their harvests and guide souls to the afterlife. You can picture priests perched on a temple roof, peering at the sky, debating whether Orion's rise means it's time to plant or pray. Historians still argue whether these stargazing sessions were more about agriculture or appeasing celestial gods. But knowing the Egyptians, it was probably both. You smile at the thought of a priest scribbling notes on papyrus, only to fumble his quill when a sacred cat swipes at it. Those cats were practically royalty here, accidentally stepping on one good luck, explaining that to the locals. You'd be in hotter water than a kettle over a fire. The path along the river beckons, and you follow it, passing a fisherman casting his net, his reed boat bobbing gently. He's likely murmuring, thanks to Hapi, the god of the Nile's bounty, hoping for a haul of tilapia to feed his family. Life here pulses with the river, but it's not all peaceful. A low grunt from the reeds reminds you of hippos, their bulk hidden in the shadows, and crocodiles, silent and sly, waiting for an unwary step. You're not signing up for a swim, unless you fancy being a crocodile's midnight snack. The Egyptians revered these creatures, even building temples to Sobek, the crocodile god, to keep them friendly. You can't help but chuckle at the idea of offering a prayer to a toothy reptile, like leaving a 5-star review to avoid trouble. The trail leads to a cluster of mud brick homes, their flat roofs dotted with sleeping mats for hot nights. A warm glow spills from an open door, carrying the aroma of barley bread baking on a clay hearth. Inside, a family might be sharing tales of Ra's sunboat sailing across the sky, or Isis weaving magic to protect her son. Most folks here are farmers, their days spent bending over fields or fetching water under a relentless sun. You'd be out there too, your shoulders sore, fantasizing about a cool drink and a nap. Beer was their go-to, a thick, chewy brew that doubled as lunch. Imagine gulping that after hours in the heat. It's less refreshing and more survival juice. You pause by a small shrine, where a carved figure of Bes, the dwarf-like protector god, grins with his tongue out. He's no beauty queen, but he guards homes from evil spirits. Especially in the dark, you give him a respectful nod. Just in case. You're not here to mess with ancient vibes. The Egyptians saw spirits everywhere. In the river, the rocks, even the wind. You grin at the thought of leaving a crumb of bread for a cranky desert sprite. Like tipping a ghostly barista to keep the peace. The village fades behind you, and the desert opens wide. Its silence vast and heavy. In the distance, the pyramids rise, their edges sharp against the starry night. They're more than tombs. They're monuments to a people obsessed with outlasting time. A chill runs through you, not from the air, but from the weight of their age. These stones were old when Cleopatra walked the earth, and she's closer to us than to their builders. That's a brain twister, isn't it? You're treading ground where workers sweated, where pharaohs dreamed of starlit journeys. It's awe-inspiring. And you're grateful you're just a visitor, not lugging limestone blocks in the noonday blaze. The Nile's soft murmur draws you back, and you settle on the bank, the cool earth soothing your feet. The night feels eternal, as if the gods are watching, curious about this fleeting guest in their realm. You're here to listen, to soak in the whispers of a world that shaped empires and stories. Let the desert's quiet cradle you, and let's wander deeper into Egypt's ancient heart, where every ripple holds a tale. Section 02. Life along the Nile. You linger on the Nile's bank, the moon casting a silver glow across the water, its ripples whispering secrets of a world long gone. The air is warm, heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming lotus, and the faint hum of crickets fills the night. You're in ancient Egypt, where the river is more than a waterway, it's the pulse of life. Crawling villages, fields, and dreams in its gentle flow. You scoop a handful of cool water, letting it slip through your fingers, and feel the weight of a civilization that thrived here for millennia. The Nile's rhythm sets the pace, and you're ready to drift deeper into its story. You push off in a reed boat, its woven frame creaking softly as you paddle through the shallows. Papyrus stalks sway around you, their feathery tops brushing the sky, and a heron lifts off with a lazy flap of wings. The Nile was Egypt's highway, carrying farmers to fields, traders to markets, and priests to temples. Around 3000 BCE, the Nile's predictable floods shaped Egypt's calendar, dividing the year into 3 seasons: flooding, planting, and harvest. That's tonight's mainstream fact. Those floods deposited rich silt, making Egypt's fields so fertile they could feed an empire. But here's a lesser-known detail. Egyptians used a tool called a nilometer, stone steps, or wells along the river, to measure flood levels, predicting whether the year would bring bounty or hunger. Too low, and crops failed; too high, and villages drowned. You can imagine a priest squinting at the waterline, muttering about Ra's mood swings. You paddle past a mud brick village, where lamplight spills from low doorways, and the scent of roasted fish wafts over the water. Families are inside, sharing bowls of lentils and flatbread, their laughter mingling with the river's murmur. Most folks here are farmers, rising before dawn to tend fields of emmer, wheat, and barley. You'd be out there too, your sandals caked with mud, coaxing crops from the black soil. It's hard work, but the Nile's gift makes it possible. Without this river, Egypt would be a barren dream, swallowed by the desert's jaws. You chuckle at the thought of explaining irrigation ditches to your modern friends. They'd probably think it's a new fitness trend. The boat glides on, and you spot a fisherman hauling in his net, moonlight glinting off the scales of his catch. He's likely praying to Hapi, the god of the flood, for a good haul. But the Nile isn't always kind. A low rumble from the reeds makes your heart skip hippos. Those grumpy river tanks lurk nearby. One wrong move, and your boat's kindling. Crocodiles, too, slide silently through the depths, their eyes like cold stars. The Egyptians didn't just fear these beasts, they worshipped them, building shrines to Sobek, the crocodile god, to keep his jaws friendly. You grin at the idea of tossing an offering to a croc, like bribing a bouncer to let you into a club. Good luck with that one. You steer clear of the reeds, hugging the open water where the Nile feels alive, its current tugging gently at your paddle. This river wasn't just for fishing or farming, it was a trade route, ferrying cedar from Lebanon, gold from Nubia, and turquoise from Sinai. Boats like yours carried Egypt's wealth, linking far-off lands in a web of commerce. You can picture merchants haggling over ebony or incense, their voices rising over the splash of oars. Historians still argue whether the Nile's trade made Egypt richer than its taxes, probably a mix of both. Since pharaohs loved their gold as much as their gods, you'd be tempted to sneak a trinket from a trader's stash. But knowing your luck, you'd get caught by a guard with a very pointy spear. The river widens, and you pass a field where workers are setting up shadoofs, wooden levers with buckets to lift water to higher ground. It's back-breaking work, and you're glad you're just drifting by, not swinging a bucket under the sun. These fields feed Egypt, but they also feed its power. The surplus grain filled pharaohs' granaries, letting them build armies, temples, and those massive pyramids you'll see soon. You can't help but smirk at the thought of a tax collector showing up with a papyrus ledger, demanding half your barley. Sorry, mate, the hippos ate it, you'd say, and hope he buys it. You pull your boat ashore near a small dock, where children are playing, tossing pebbles into the water. Their giggles echo, and you notice their amulets, tiny charms of Horus's eye, or Anubis's jackal head dangling from their necks. Superstition runs deep here. Every ripple in the Nile might be a god's whisper. Parents tell tales of spirits in the reeds, warning kids to stay close. You'd probably scare yourself silly, thinking every splash is a river demon. The Egyptians didn't mess around with the unseen offerings of bread or beer were left at shrines to keep spirits happy. You imagine leaving a cupcake for a cranky water sprite, just to see if it works. The village hums with life as you wander closer. A woman kneads dough by a clay oven, her hands dusted with flour, while a man repairs a net, cursing a tear that let his catch escape. These are the people who made Egypt tick, their labor feeding the pharaoh's grand dreams. But life wasn't all toil. On festival days, they'd gather by the river, singing and dancing under torchlight, their voices carrying across the water. You'd join in, though your modern dance moves might raise some eyebrows. Is that a new ritual, they'd ask? And you'd just nod, hoping they don't sacrifice you to Osiris. You settle on a grassy bank, the Nile's murmur lulling you. The stars above are sharp, and you recall how the Egyptians saw them as souls of the dead, sailing across the sky. It's a comforting thought, that even in this ancient world, people looked up and dreamed of eternity. The river's flow feels timeless, connecting you to farmers who stood here thousands of years ago. Their hopes not so different from yours. You're glad you're just a visitor, not stuck wrestling hippos or haggling with taxmen. Let's keep drifting. Following the Nile's call to the heart of Egypt's story, Section 03, Building the Pyramids. You leave the Nile's gentle embrace behind. Its murmurs fading as you step onto a sun-baked plateau, where the desert stretches wide and golden. The air shimmers with heat, carrying the gritty tang of sand and the distant clang of chisels on stone. You're standing at Giza, where the pyramids rise like mountains carved by human hands. Their limestone faces catching the noon sun. The Great Pyramid, Khufu's masterpiece, towers above you, a geometric marvel that makes your neck ache just looking up. You wipe your brow, already slick with sweat, and feel the weight of a civilization's ambition pressing down. Building these giants was no small feat, and you're about to step into the lives of those who made it happen. Trust me, your gym membership wouldn't prepare you for this kind of workout. You join a line of workers hauling a massive limestone block, its edges rough under your palms. The rope bites into your shoulder as you lean into the pull, your sandals slipping on the ramp's packed earth. Shouts echo around you, foremen barking orders in a language sharp and rhythmic. Around 2550 BCE, Pharaoh Khufu commissioned the Great Pyramid, a tomb to secure his journey to the afterlife. That's tonight's mainstream fact. It took roughly 20 years to build, using about 3 million stone blocks, each weighing as much as a small car. But here's a lesser-known detail. The workers weren't slaves, as old stories claimed, but skilled laborers and farmers, paid in bread, beer, and onions. They lived in nearby camps, their bones showing signs of hard work, but also healed injuries, suggesting they were cared for. You grin, imagining a worker trading his onion ration for an extra mug of beer. Onions as currency. That's a new one. The ramp slopes upward, and you strain against the rope, your muscles burning. The workers around you chant a rhythm to keep pace, their voices blending with the scrape of stone. You're impressed by their teamwork, but you'd kill for a water break under a palm tree. Historians still argue whether the ramps were straight, zigzagged, or wrapped around the pyramid like a spiral. Each theory has its fans, but no one's cracked the code for sure. You picture a foreman sketching plans in the sand, only to have a camel wander through and ruin his masterpiece. Bet he'd have some choice words for that hump-backed architect. Dust swirls as another block slots into place, and you pause to catch your breath. The pyramid's base stretches wider than a football field, each side aligned with the cardinal points so precisely it boggles the mind. The Egyptians used stars to guide their measurements, probably squinting at Polaris late at night. You can't help but admire their smarts, though you'd probably drop your measuring rod and call it a day. Tools here are simple copper chisels, wooden sleds, and sheer grit. Workers pour water on the sand to reduce friction, letting blocks glide more easily. You're tempted to splash some on your face, but you'd rather not get yelled at by a burly overseer. You glance at the workers' camp nearby, where mud brick huts huddle under acacia trees. Smoke curls from cooking fires, carrying the scent of barley stew and garlic. These men ate well for their time, their diets packed with calories to fuel this monumental task. Archaeologists found bakeries that churned out thousands of loaves daily, and you imagine biting into warm, crusty bread after a long shift. It's no sourdough artisanal loaf, but it beats the gritty porridge you'd get back home. The camp hums with life families visit. Children play with clay toys, and someone strums a lute, its notes drifting over the chatter. It's not all sweat and stone. There's camaraderie here, a shared pride in building something eternal. A shadow passes overhead, and you look up to see a hawk circling, its cry sharp against the desert's hum. To the Egyptians, it's a sign of Horus, the sky god, watching over their work. Religion fuels this project, every block laid to honor Khufu's divine soul. Priests roam the site, burning incense and chanting prayers to keep the gods happy. You nod respectfully at one passing by, his linen robe pristine, despite the dust. You'd probably trip over your own robe and land in a pile of sand. Earning a laugh from the crew. Faith runs deep here, tying the workers to a purpose bigger than themselves. The pyramid isn't just a tomb, it's a bridge to the stars. A promise of immortality. You step back, letting the workers continue their haul, and wander toward the pyramid's base. Its limestone casing, once polished to a mirror-like sheen, reflects the sun so brightly. You squint. Most of that casing is gone now, stripped century later. But you can imagine its original glory. Dazzling travelers from miles away. You run your hand over a block, its surface warm and smooth, and feel a connection to the hands that shaped it. These workers weren't just building for Khufu, they were crafting a legacy for Egypt itself. You're glad you're not chiseling stone under this sun. Though, your air-conditioned couch is sounding pretty divine right about now. The horizon glows orange as the sun dips low, painting the pyramids in hues of fire. You find a spot to sit, your back against a boulder, and watch the workers wind down. They joke and stretch, their silhouettes dark against the sky. The desert cools, and a breeze carries the faint scent of myrrh from a nearby shrine. You recall the Nile's ripples from last night, how they fed the fields that fed these men. Everything in Egypt connects river, land, labor, gods. It's a delicate balance, and you're in awe of how they kept it spinning for so long. The pyramids stand as proof, silent, but shouting their story across millennia. As night creeps in, stars prick the sky, and you feel the weight of time settle around you. The workers' camp glows with firelight, and a soft song rises, maybe a hymn to Ra, or a lullaby for tired souls. You're just a visitor, but you carry their story now, a piece of their sweat and dreams. Let's keep moving, past the pyramid's shadow, to where pharaohs rule as gods among men. Section 04. Pharaoh's Divine Rule. You step away from the Giza Plateau, the pyramid's shadows stretching long as the sun sinks low. The desert air cools, carrying the faint scent of dust and frankincense, and you find yourself on a path leading to Memphis, Egypt's ancient capital. The city hums with life, its mud brick walls glowing gold in the twilight. You pass a bustling market, where merchants hawk figs and copper bangles, their voices fading as you approach a grand palace. Its limestone columns soaring into the sky. Guards with bronze spears stand at the gates, their eyes sharp. But you slip through unnoticed, drawn by the murmur of a crowd inside. You're about to meet a pharaoh, a living god whose word shapes the Nile's world. No pressure, but you'd better bow low, unless you fancy a one-way trip to the crocodiles. You enter a vast hall, its walls painted with scenes of battles and gods, the colors vivid, even in torchlight. At the far end, on a throne of ebony and gold, sits the pharaoh, his face serene beneath a blue and gold headdress. His double crown, red and white, symbolizes his rule over Upper and Lower Egypt, and a false beard tied to his chin marks his divine status. You kneel, the cool stone floor pressing against your knees, and feel the weight of his gaze. Around 2686 BCE, the Old Kingdom began, and pharaohs like Dioza solidified their role as god-kings, ruling as intermediaries between humans and the heavens. That's tonight's mainstream fact. Pharaohs were seen as divine, their authority absolute, their every decree a cosmic command. But here's a lesser-known detail. Some pharaohs, like Pepi II, who ruled for over 90 years, that were so young when crowned, that their mothers or regents held real power, whispering orders from behind the throne. You smirk, imagining a 6-year-old pharaoh demanding extra honey cakes while his mom runs the kingdom. The crowd around you is a mix of nobles, priests, and scribes, their linen robes rustling as they bow. Incense curls through the air, sweet and heavy, and a priest chants praises to Horus, the falcon god, whose spirit lives in the pharaoh. You're struck by the pageantry, but you'd probably trip over your own robe, trying to keep up with the protocol. The pharaoh raises a golden scepter, and silence falls. He speaks, his voice calm, but commanding, ordering a new temple for Amun-Ra. You can't help but marvel at his power. Imagine snapping your fingers and a city rises. Of course, you'd probably just order a pyramid-sized pizza and call it a day. You shift slightly, catching a glimpse of the pharaoh's wife, the great royal wife, seated beside him. Her wig gleams with gold beads, and her eyes are sharp, missing nothing. Queens weren't just arm candy. Some, like Hatshepsut, later ruled as pharaohs themselves, proving women could wield divine power too. You nod respectfully, hoping she doesn't notice your dusty sandals. The court is a web of alliances and rivalries, and you're glad you're just passing through, not navigating this snake pit. Historians still argue whether Pharaoh's divinity was purely symbolic or if they truly believed they were gods, likely a bit of both. Since ego and faith make a potent mix, you chuckle at the thought of a pharaoh checking his reflection, muttering, "Yep, still godly." The hall buzzes as courtiers whisper about taxes and Nubian gold. The pharaoh's rule wasn't just spiritual. He controlled Egypt's wealth, armies, and laws. Taxes came in grain, linen, or labor, and you can picture farmers grumbling as they hand over their harvest. You'd probably hide a few bushels under your hut's floor, hoping the taxman doesn't sniff them out. The pharaoh's officials, armed with papyrus ledgers, kept the kingdom humming. But corruption wasn't unknown. A bribe here, a favor there sounds familiar, doesn't it? Yet the pharaoh's divine status kept rebellion rare. Defying him was defying the gods, and nobody wanted Anubis knocking at their door. You move to a side chamber, where a scribe etches a decree onto a stone stele, his reed pen scratching softly. The pharaoh's words will be carved across Egypt, from Memphis to Thebes, ensuring his legacy endures. You recall the pyramids from last night, monuments to this same divine ambition. Every stone, every decree, ties back to the Nile's flow, feeding the wealth that fuels this court. You're awed by the system, but you're not signing up for scribe duty. Your handwriting's bad enough without trying hieroglyphs. The scribe glances up, and you nod, hoping he doesn't quiz you on royal titles. Outside, the palace gardens bloom with lotus and acacia, their scent mingling with the Nile's earthy breath. You wander past a statue of Maat, goddess of truth and balance, her ostrich feather gleaming in the moonlight. The pharaoh's job was to uphold Maat, keeping chaos at bay. Floods, wars, or famine could disrupt this balance, and you can imagine the court holding its breath when the Nile ran low. You'd probably pray extra hard to Happy, tossing in a loaf of bread for good measure. Priests advised the pharaoh, their rituals as vital as his decrees. A bad omen, like a comet or a dead sacred bull, could spark panic, and you're glad you're not the one explaining it to the masses. You pause by a reflecting pool, where stars shimmer on the water. The pharaoh's power feels distant here, but his presence lingers in every statue, every whispered prayer. His divine rule shaped Egypt, from the fields you saw to the pyramid stones. Yet he was human too. sweating under his heavy crown, maybe sneaking a nap when the court wasn't looking. You smile, picturing him yawning during a long ritual, his vizier nudging him awake. The night deepens, and you feel the pull of the city beyond, where temples glow with sacred fires. Let's slip away, following the chants, to where Egypt's gods hold sway. Section 05, Temples of Eternal Gods. You slip out of the pharaoh's palace, the cool night air brushing your skin as you leave Memphis's golden glow behind. The path leads you toward Thebes, where the Nile glints under a star-strewn sky, its waters whispering secrets of the gods. The scent of myrrh lingers, mingling with the earthy tang of river mud, and you hear faint chants drifting from a massive stone complex ahead. Karnak's temples loom into view, their colossal columns etched with hieroglyphs that shimmer in torchlight. You pose, awed by the scale, feeling like a speck in the presence of divine giants. These aren't just buildings, they're gateways to the eternal, where priests commune with gods to keep Egypt's world spinning. You'd better tread softly here. Unless you want to annoy a deity who's got lightning on speed dial, you step through a towering gateway, its sandstone warm under your fingers, and enter a courtyard vast enough to swallow a village. Priests in white linen robes move like shadows, their shaved heads gleaming as they tend flickering oil lamps. The air hums with their chants, a low, rhythmic pulse that seems to vibrate through the stones. Around 1550 BCE, during the New Kingdom, Karnak became Egypt's spiritual heart, dedicated to Amun-Ra, the sun god who ruled the pantheon. That's tonight's mainstream fact. Karnak's temples expanded over centuries, were the largest religious complex in ancient Egypt, a testament to divine devotion. But here's a lesser-known detail. Priests used secret passages beneath the temples to make statues move during rituals, convincing worshippers of the god's living presence. You smirk, imagining a priest pulling levers backstage, hoping nobody peeks behind the curtain. The courtyard leads to the hypostyle hall, where 134 massive columns rise like a stone forest, their capitals carved to mimic papyrus buds. You crane your neck, dizzy from the height, and trace the painted reliefs of pharaohs offering lotus flowers to Amun-Ra. The colors blue, red, gold are vivid, as if painted yesterday, and you're tempted to touch them. But a stern priest's glance stops you cold. You'd probably leave a smudge and get banished to the desert for eternity. The hall feels alive, its shadows dancing in the lamplight, and you can almost hear the gods whispering. Temples like this weren't open to commoners. Only priests and pharaohs walked these sacred floors, mediating between mortals and the divine. You're lucky to be sneaking a peek, but don't expect an invite to the holy after-party. You follow a priest down a corridor, the air growing cooler as you pass shrines to lesser gods, Sekhmet, the lioness of war, and Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe. Incense burns on altars, its smoke curling like a prayer, and you catch the faint clink of gold offerings being placed before a statue. The priests' lives revolve around rituals, dressing divine statues, offering food, singing hymns at dawn and dusk. You admire their dedication, but you'd fumble the incense burner and set your robe on fire. Historians still argue whether these rituals were purely symbolic, or if priests believed the gods truly ate the offerings, probably a mix of faith and theatre. Since Egypt loved a good show, the food, by the way, was later shared with temple workers, so no bread went to waste. Smart move. Gods or not, you emerge into a sacred lake. Its still waters, reflecting the stars like a mirror to the heavens. Priests bathe here before rituals, purifying themselves for the god's presence. You dip your fingers in the cool water, half expecting a divine tingle. But it's just wet. The lake's edge is lined with lotus blossoms, their petals pale in the moonlight. And you recall how Egyptians saw them as symbols of rebirth, opening with the sun each day. It's poetic. But you'd rather not wade in with the frogs croaking nearby. You imagine a priest slipping on the muddy bank, splashing his sacred linen, and stifling a curse. Even holy men have bad days. Right, the temple's heart lies ahead, a sanctuary where Amun, Ra's statue gleams, draped in gold and lapis lazuli. Only the high priest enters here, and you linger outside, respecting the mystery. The statue's eyes seem to follow you, and you shiver, wondering if it's a trick of the light or something more. Egyptians believed their gods lived in these images, their spirits animating the stone during rituals. You nod respectfully, not wanting to test that theory. The temple's wealth gold, grain, land made priests powerful, sometimes rivaling pharaohs. You can picture a high priest negotiating with the court, his calm voice hiding a steel edge. You'd stay out of that power game, sticking to safer bets, like dodging sacred cats. You wander back to the courtyard, where a festival crowd gathers, their voices rising in song. Torches flare, casting warm light on faces, painted with joy. These rare public events let commoners glimpse the god's glory. And you join the throng, swaying to a harp's mournful notes. Offerings of bread and beer pile high, and you're tempted to grab a loaf. But you'd rather not anger Osiris. The festival honors the Nile's flood, tying back to the river you left behind. Its waters feeding the fields that fund this splendor. Everything in Egypt circles back to the Nile. Like a song that never ends, the night deepens, and you find a quiet corner by a pylon. Its carvings telling of Pharaoh's victories. You sit, the stone cool against your back, and watch the stars wheel overhead. The temple feels timeless, a bridge between earth and sky, where gods and mortals meet. You recall the pharaoh's throne, his divine rule rooted in these sacred spaces. The priests' chants fade, but their echo lingers, a lullaby for a land that worships eternity. You're just a visitor, but you carry the gods' whispers now, their stories woven into your dreams. Let's drift on, following the Nile's call to where stories are carved in stone. Section 06. Hieroglyphs tell tales you ease away from Karnak's sacred glow. The priest's chants fading into the night as you follow a moonlit path along the Nile. The river's murmur wraps around you, its waters catching starlight like scattered gems, and the air carries the faint scent of papyrus and warm sand. You're in ancient Egypt, where every stone holds a story. And tonight, those stories are written in hieroglyphs, the intricate script that dances across temple walls and tombs. You spot a carved obelisk ahead, its surface alive with symbols, eyes, reeds, falcons, each one a whisper from the past. You're about to dive into the world of scribes and stone, where words were magic, and a single glyph could summon gods or curse enemies. Better watch your step, unless you want to accidentally scribble a spell that turns you into a lotus flower. You approach the obelisk, its granite cool under your fingertips, and trace a cartouche, an oval, framing a pharaoh's name, like a royal signature, etched for eternity. Hieroglyphs, developed around 3100 BCE, were Egypt's sacred writing system, used for everything, from temple decrees to love poems. That's tonight's mainstream fact. This script, with over 700 symbols, was a cornerstone of Egyptian culture, preserving their history for millennia. But here's a lesser-known detail: hieroglyphs weren't just for stone. Scribes wrote a simpler, cursive version called hieratic, on papyrus for everyday records like tax lists or laundry counts. You grin, imagining a scribe tallying someone's socks, muttering about missing pairs. Bet he'd lose his mind over your modern laundry pile. You sit by the obelisk. The desert's quiet, settling around you, and watch a scribe nearby, his reed pen scratching across a papyrus sheet. His lamp flickers, casting shadows on his focused face. And you're struck by his precision. Scribes were elite, trained from childhood to master the script's complexity. They weren't just clerks, they were keepers of Egypt's soul, their words binding the living to the divine. You'd probably smudge the ink and ruin a sacred text, earning a scowl from the local priest. The scribe's glyphs tell of a pharaoh's victory. Each symbol, a puzzle, snakes for protection, owls for wisdom. You're tempted to ask for a lesson, but you'd rather not humiliate yourself in front of a guy who writes better than you text. The script's power went beyond record-keeping. Egyptians believed words held magic. A carved curse could doom a tomb robber, while a prayer etched in stone ensured a soul's safe passage. You recall the temples from last night, their walls alive with these spells, linking back to the pharaoh's divine rule. Historians still argue whether hieroglyphs were purely practical or always infused with spiritual meaning, likely both. Since Egypt blurred the line between mundane and divine, you chuckle at the thought of a scribe accidentally cursing his neighbor's goat while practicing his glyphs. Talk about a bad day at the office. You wander toward a temple wall, its reliefs glowing under torchlight, and study a scene of Osiris judging a soul. The glyphs explain each step, from weighing the heart to granting eternity. You're awed by the detail, but deciphering it feels like cracking a cosmic code. It wasn't until the 19th century, with the Rosetta Stone's discovery, that scholars unlocked hieroglyphs' secrets, revealing Egypt's voice after centuries of silence. You imagine Jean-François Champollion, the French decoder, staying up late with coffee and papyrus, cursing every tricky symbol. You'd probably give up and Google it, hoping for a cheat sheet. The path leads to a scribe's school, where boys hunch over clay tablets, practicing signs under a teacher's stern gaze. The air smells of ink and dust, and you hear the soft scrape of reeds. These kids are Egypt's future, their skills ensuring the kingdom's records endure. You respect their hustle, but you're glad you're not memorizing Yiddish glyphs for homework. Scribes wrote everything: taxes, laws, myths on papyrus made from Nile reeds, tying back to the river's life-giving flow. You can picture a student sneaking a doodle of a cat, only to get caught and assigned extra owl glyphs. Kids, ancient or modern, never change. You pause by a market stall, where a vendor sells amulets carved with protective glyphs. You pick one up, its Ankh symbol, promising life, and feel its weight in your palm. Egyptians wore these charms, believing they warded off evil, and you're tempted to keep it, just in case a stray curse follows you home. You smile, imagining explaining a hieroglyphic necklace to your friends. They'd think you're starting a cult. The vendor's chatter pulls you back, his voice praising Thoth, the god of writing, who gifted humans this script. You nod, recalling Thoth's ibis head from the temples, and wonder if he'd approve of your sloppy handwriting. The night deepens, and you find a quiet spot by the Nile, the obelisk's silhouette sharp against the stars. You sit, the river's murmur soothing, and think of the scribe's legacy. Their glyphs told tales of pharaohs and gods, of harvests and battles, weaving Egypt's story into stone and papyrus. You feel a connection to them, their words reaching across time. Just as the Nile's waters fed the fields, you saw the script's magic lingers, a spell of memory that binds you to this ancient world. Let's keep wandering, following the river's call to where the dead are prepared for eternity. Section 07. Mummies and Afterlife Dreams. You drift away from the moonlit obelisk, its hieroglyphs fading into the night as you follow the Nile's gentle curve. The air is warm, laced with the scent of myrrh and river reeds, and the soft lap of water against the bank feels like a lullaby. You're in ancient Egypt, where life and death are two sides of the same coin. And tonight, you're stepping into the realm of mummies, where bodies are preserved for a journey beyond the stars. Ahead, a low, mud brick building glows with torchlight, its door guarded by a priest in a jackal mask. You pose, heart quickening, as the scent of natron's salty and sharp wafts out. This is the house of purification, where the dead are prepared for eternity. You'd better keep quiet, unless you want to be mistaken for a soul needing a one-way ticket to the afterlife. You slip inside, the cool stone floor soothing your feet, and find yourself in a dimly lit chamber. Priests move with practiced grace, their linen robes whispering as they tend a body on a stone slab. The air hums with their chants, a low plea to Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming. Around 2600 BCE, during the Old Kingdom, mummification became a refined art, ensuring the dead could live forever in the afterlife. That's tonight's mainstream fact: mummification. A 70-day process. Preserved bodies so well that some, like Tutankhamun's, remain intact today. But here's a lesser-known detail. The brain was removed through the nose with a hooked tool, a grisly task priests performed with surprising nonchalance. You wince, imagining a priest sneezing mid-procedure. Talk about a bad day at the mortuary. The body on the slab is wrapped in linen strips, each layer soaked in resin to seal it tight. You watch, mesmerized, as a priest places an amulet shaped like a scarab over the heart, whispering a spell to protect the soul. The process is meticulous: organs removed, stored in canopic jars, the body dried with natron, then stuffed with sawdust or herbs to keep its shape. You're impressed by the care, but you'd rather not be the one handling the liver jar. The Egyptians believed the soul, or Ka, needed its body to survive the afterlife. So, every detail mattered. You recall the hieroglyphs from last night, their magic echoing in these rituals, tying the living to the divine. Historians still argue whether mummification was purely spiritual or also a flex of wealth, probably both, since pharaohs didn't skimp on golden masks. You step closer, noticing the priest's tools: bronze knives, alabaster bowls, a pile of natron crystals glinting like salt. The chamber smells of cedar oil and spices, masking the grim work. Only the elite could afford full mummification. Commoners got simpler burials, often just a desert grave, where the dry sand did the preserving. You're glad you're not on the budget plan, but you'd probably faint at the sight of those hooks anyway. The priest's chants grow louder, invoking Osiris, the god of the dead, whose resurrection promised eternal life. You feel a chill, not from the air, but from the weight of their faith. A belief so strong it shaped every cut and prayer. You move to a side room, where a coffin waits, its wood painted with scenes of the afterlife: fields of reeds, rots in golden boats, the soul soaring as a bird. The lid bears the dead man's face, serene and stylized, his eyes outlined in kohl. You're struck by the artistry, but you'd rather not test if the coffin's comfy. The sarcophagus will be sealed in a tomb, packed with food, jewelry, and shabti figurines to serve the soul in the afterlife. You recall the pyramids, their chambers built for this same purpose. Linking back to the pharaoh's divine rule, Egyptians didn't fear death. They planned for it. Like packing for a cosmic road trip. You smirk, picturing a noble double-checking his tomb's wine stash. Gotta have priorities. Right. You step outside. The night air, a relief after the chamber's heavy scent. Stars blaze above. And you remember how Egyptians saw them as souls sailing the sky. The afterlife was no vague hope. It was a vivid world of feasts and fields. If your heart passed the judgment of Ma'at, in the field of reeds, the dead lived as they had on earth. Farming, singing, eating, you'd sign up for the eternal buffet. But you'd probably trip over a celestial plough. The judgment scene haunts you, the heart weighed against Ma'at's feather. Anubis watching. Amid the devourer, ready to pounce if you fail. You pat your chest, hoping your heart's light enough. You wander to a nearby necropolis, where tombs dot the desert, their entrances sealed with spells. A worker carves a false door, a portal for the car to come and go. Offerings of bread and beer sit nearby, left by family to feed the soul. You're tempted to grab a loaf, but you'd rather not mess with a ghost's lunch. Tombs were targets for robbers. Despite curses carved in stone, you recall the hieroglyphs' magic, their words guarding these graves, tying back to the scribe's quiet power. The desert silence feels heavy, broken only by a distant jackal's howl, and you wonder if it's Anubis patrolling his domain. You find a quiet spot by a tomb, the sand cool beneath you, and sit, gazing at the stars. The mummification chamber's rituals linger in your mind, a testament to Egypt's obsession with eternity. You feel the Nile's pulse in the distance, its waters feeding the living and guiding the dead. The priest's chants, the pharaoh's throne, the pyramid stones all weave together in this land where death is just another journey. You're just a visitor, but you carry their dreams now, their faith in a world beyond the grave. Let's keep moving, following the river's call to where daily life hums under the sun. Section 08 Daily Life in Thebes. You leave the necropolis behind. The desert silence giving way to the lively hum of Thebes as you follow a sunlit path along the Nile. The morning air is warm, scented with fresh-baked bread and the faint tang of river mud. And the city sprawls before you, its mud-brick houses gleaming under a cloudless sky. You're in ancient Egypt, where daily life pulses with the rhythm of work, family, and small joys, all tied to the river's endless flow. You pass a market where vendors shout over piles of onions and figs, their voices blending with the bleat of goats and the laughter of children. You're about to dive into the everyday world of Theban's farmers, artisans, and traders who keep Egypt's heart beating. Just don't expect a coffee shop on every corner. Your caffeine fix is a distant dream here. You weave through the market, dodging a donkey laden with baskets of barley. A woman haggles over a bolt of linen, her hands gesturing wildly, and you catch the sharp scent of garlic from a nearby stall. Around 1350 BCE, Thebes was Egypt's thriving capital during the New Kingdom, a hub of trade and culture rivaling any ancient city. That's tonight's mainstream fact. Thebes, with its temples and palaces, was home to tens of thousands, its wealth fueled by the Nile's bounty and Pharaoh's conquests. But here's a lesser-known detail. Ordinary Thebans lived in cramped, multi-story houses, often sharing walls with neighbors and keeping livestock on the ground floor. You grin, imagining a goat chewing your sandals while you're trying to sleep upstairs. Bet you'd trade your apartment for a quiet cave right about now. You pause by a baker's stall, where a man kneads dough on a stone slab, his arms dusted with flour. The oven's heat hits you, and you watch him slide flatbreads onto glowing coals. Bread was life here, eaten with every meal, often dipped in lentil stew or smeared with honey. You're tempted to grab a warm loaf, but you'd probably burn your fingers and make a scene. Most Thebans were farmers or laborers, rising before dawn to tend fields or craft goods for temples. You'd be out there too, your back aching from hauling water or shaping clay pots, dreaming of a shady nap by the Nile. The market buzzes with their labor's fruits, pottery, baskets, even tiny faience amulets, glinting blue. You admire a scarab charm, but you're not trading your shirt for it, no matter how lucky it's supposed to be. You follow a narrow alley, the walls cool to the touch, and glimpse a family eating breakfast on a rooftop. They share a bowl of porridge, their chatter drifting down, and a cat lounges nearby, eyeing their scraps. Cats were sacred, pest control with a divine resume. And you chuckle, picturing a Theban, apologizing to one for spilling beer. Life wasn't all work. Families played board games like Senet, rolling knucklebones to move pieces across a grid. You'd probably lose spectacularly, blaming the dice for your bad luck. Historians still argue whether Senet was just fun or had ritual meaning, maybe guiding souls in the afterlife, knowing Egypt. It was likely both, blending play with prayer. You pass a workshop where a potter spins clay on a wheel, his hands shaping a jug with easy skill. The air smells of wet earth, and you're struck by how every craft ties back to the Nile clay from its banks. Reeds for baskets, flax for linen. Artisans were respected, their goods filling pharaohs' tombs and traders' boats. Linking to the mummies and hieroglyphs you've seen, women worked too, weaving cloth or brewing beer. A thick brew that doubled as wages. You imagine sipping it, then wince it's more like liquid oatmeal than your favorite IPA. Thebes' economy thrived on this labor, but taxes kept everyone on edge. You can picture a tax collector with a papyrus ledger, eyeing your grain sack suspiciously. You'd hide a few handfuls, hoping he doesn't notice. You wander to a riverside, quay, where boats unload, cedar and turquoise, their crews shouting over the splash of oars. The Nile's flow, which you felt nights ago, makes this trade possible, linking Thebes to distant lands. Merchants bartaient loudly, one offering a Nubian leopard skin for a jar of myrrh. You're tempted to join the haggling, but you'd probably end up with a fake amulet and no sandals. The key's energy is infectious, and you see Egypt's wealth in every bundle: gold, grain, spices, all taxed to fund temples and pyramids. You recall the pharaoh's court, its splendor built on this bustle, and feel the city's pulse under your feet. You find a shady spot under a date palm, its fronds rustling in the breeze, and watch children chase a ball through the dust. Their laughter echoes, and you notice their amulets, tiny ankh crosses glinting at their necks. Faith weaves through daily life, shrines to Bees or Hathor dot every street. Offerings of flowers left at dawn. You'd probably leave a cookie for Bees, hoping he likes chocolate. Religion wasn't separate from work or play. It was the thread holding Thebes together. Priests from Karnak's temples walk by, their robes pristine, and you nod, recalling their chants. The gods were as real as the Nile, their presence felt in every harvest and heartbeat. The sun climbs higher, and you settle on the grass, the Nile's murmur soothing your thoughts. Thebes feels alive, its people weaving a tapestry of labor, love, and faith. You carry their story now, their daily grind, echoing the scribe's glyphs and mummy's dreams. Let's keep wandering, following the river's call to where the Nile's magic shapes the land. Section 09: Nile's flooding magic. You rise from your shady spot in Thebes, the market's bustle fading as you follow a dusty path back to the Nile's edge. The midday sun beats down, warming your shoulders, and the river sparkles like a ribbon of liquid gold. its current slow and steady. The air hums with the scent of wet silt and blooming papyrus. And you hear the distant creak of a shadoof lifting water from the bank. You're in ancient Egypt, where the Nile's annual flood is more than a natural event, it's a divine gift. A miracle that turns desert into Eden. You pose, toes sinking into the cool mud, and feel the river's pulse, a rhythm that feeds fields and dreams. This is the season of Aket, when the Nile swells, and you're about to witness its magic. Just don't slip into the water. Unless you fancy a chat with that crocodile god you dodged earlier. You walk along the bank, passing farmers who scan the horizon, their faces etched with hope. The Nile's flood, starting around July, transforms Egypt's parched lands into fertile fields, a cycle as reliable as the stars. Around 3000 BCE, Egyptians mastered this rhythm, building basins and canals to harness the flood's silt-rich waters. That's tonight's mainstream fact. The Nile's inundation made Egypt one of the ancient world's most productive agricultural powers, feeding millions with surplus grain. But here's a lesser-known detail: priests used sacred crocodiles, adorned with gold earrings, to predict flood levels, believing their behavior signaled the river's mood. You grin, picturing a priest squinting at a bejeweled croc, hoping it doesn't yawn and ruin the prophecy. Bet he'd rather check a weather app. The river's edge is alive with activity. As the flood begins, water creeps over the banks, turning dry sand into glistening pools. And you see farmers wade in, their linen kilts hitched high. They scoop mud with wooden hoes, spreading the black silt like a painter's canvas. This is Kemet, the black land you heard about nights ago. Its soil so rich, it grows wheat and barley with ease. You'd be out there too, your back aching, your sandals lost in the muck, praying for a breeze. The flood's timing is critical, too weak, and crops wither, too strong, and villages vanish underwater. You chuckle at the thought of a farmer shaking his fist at the Nile, demanding it stick to the schedule. You pass a nilometer, a stone staircase descending into the river, its steps marked to measure the flood's rise. A priest records the level on papyrus, his brow furrowed. These readings guided taxes and planting, and you can imagine the tension when the water's too low. Historians still argue whether nilometers were purely practical or also sacred. Since priests tied flood levels to divine will, probably both. Knowing Egypt's knack for blending faith and function, you're tempted to dip your toes in the nilometer, but you'd probably trip and splash the priest's notes, earning a glare that could summon Anubis. The flood's magic isn't just soil, it's life. Fish swarm the rising waters, and you spot a boy with a net, grinning as he hauls in a wriggling tilapia. Families gather reeds for baskets and boats, their chatter mingling with the river's song. The Nile's gift ties back to the Theban markets you saw, their stalls piled with grain from these fields. It feeds the scribe's papyrus, the priest's offerings, even the pharaoh's golden court. You're awed by the connection, but you'd rather not wrestle a fish for dinner. You imagine biting into one, scales and all, and decide you'll stick to bread. Thanks. You wander to a village where mud brick houses stand on raised ground, safe from the flood's reach. Women knead dough by open fires, the scent of barley bread wafting over you, while children splash in shallow pools, their laughter bright. The flood brings joy, a promise of full bellies and fat harvests. You recall the mummy's afterlife dreams, their eternal fields, mirroring these earthly ones. Festivals mark the flood's peak, with songs to Hapi, the river god, and you can picture villagers dancing under torchlight, their voices carrying across the water. You join in, but your dance moves might scare the sacred crocodiles. You pause by a canal, its banks lined with date palms, their fronds swaying in the breeze. Farmers dig channels to guide the flood, their hoes flashing in the sun. This work is ancient, passed down through generations, and you feel the weight of their knowledge. The Nile's flood isn't just water, it's a pact between land and gods, sealed with sweat and prayer. You recall Karnak's chants, the priest's rituals ensuring the river's favor. A heron glides overhead, its wings slicing the sky, and you nod, seeing Thoth's wisdom in its grace. You'd probably trip over a canal bank, splashing your tunic and earning laughs from the locals. You find a shady spot under a sycamore, its roots drinking deep from the flood's edge, and sit. The Nile's murmur, soothing your thoughts. The river's magic feels alive, its waters weaving through every moment you've seen fields, markets, temples. You carry the farmers' hopes now, their faith in the flood's promise. The sun dips lower, painting the water gold, and you feel Egypt's heartbeat, steady and eternal. Let's keep drifting, following the Nile's call to where a queen dazzles the world. Section 10. Cleopatra's dazzling court. You rise from the sycamore's shade, the Nile's golden shimmer fading as you leave the flood's gentle embrace behind. The air grows warm, scented with jasmine and the faint tang of sea salt, and you find yourself on a marble path leading to Alexandria, Egypt's glittering Juwel. The city sparkles under a twilight sky, its lighthouse beacon slicing through the dusk, guiding ships to a harbor alive with sails. You're in ancient Egypt. But this is no muddy village. It's the cosmopolitan court of Cleopatra, where power, charm, and intrigue dance like torchlight on gold. You pass a palace gate, its columns carved with lotus flowers, and hear laughter spill from within, mingled with the strum of a lyre. You're about to meet the last pharaoh, a queen who outwitted empires. Just don't spill your wine on her carpet. Unless you want to charm your way out of a diplomatic disaster, you slip into the palace, the cool marble soothing your feet, and enter a grand hall draped in silk. Its walls aglow with frescoes of gods and stars, courtiers in fine linen and gold chatter in Greek, Latin, and Egyptian. Their voices, a tapestry of cultures. At the center, reclining on a gilded couch, is Cleopatra VII, her dark eyes sharp as a falcon's, her smile both warm and calculating. Around 51 BCE, she ascended the throne at 18, ruling Egypt during its final days as an independent kingdom. That's tonight's mainstream fact. Cleopatra, the last Ptolemaic ruler, was a master of diplomacy, keeping Rome at bay through sheer charisma and strategy. But here's a lesser-known detail. She spoke 9 languages, including Egyptian, unlike her Greek predecessors, winning her people's hearts by honoring their tongue. You grin, imagining her switching from Latin to Nubian mid-conversation, leaving ambassadors tongue-tied. Bet you'd fumble your high school Spanish in this crowd. You linger near a table laden with figs, pomegranates, and honeyed cakes, the air heavy with rosewater and myrrh. Servants pour wine from silver jugs, and you're tempted to grab a goblet, but you'd probably clink glasses too loudly and draw every eye. Cleopatra's court is a stage, every gesture watched, every word weighed. She speaks now, her voice clear and melodic, debating trade with a Roman envoy. Her wit sparkles, and you're struck by her command. She's no mere figurehead, but a queen who rules with mind and heart. You recall the Nile's flood from last night, its bounty funding, this opulence, tying her court to the river's ancient pulse. You'd love to join the debate, but your modern slang might raise eyebrows. Chill. Rome. Let's vibe. Probably wouldn't cut it. You move to a balcony, the sea breeze cooling your skin, and watch ships unload spices and ivory in the harbour below. Alexandria's wealth flows through these docks, fed by the Nile's trade routes you saw in Thebes. Cleopatra's genius lies in balancing this wealth with Rome's hunger, playing Julius Caesar and Mark Antony like pieces on a Senate board. Historians still argue whether her alliances were driven by love or pure strategy, likely both. Since she was as human as she was cunning, you chuckle, picturing her rolling her eyes at Caesar's bad jokes, then charming him with a smile. You'd probably trip over your own feet trying to impress her, landing in a pile of scrolls. The hall buzzes as a poet recites verses praising Isis, Cleopatra's patron goddess, and you notice her crown, shaped like a vulture, symbolizing divine protection. She claimed descent from the gods, echoing the pharaoh's divine rule you saw in Memphis. Her palace blends Greek elegance with Egyptian grandeur. Marble columns meet lotus motifs, a nod to her dual heritage. You're awed by the fusion, but you'd probably knock over a bust of Alexander the Great and start an international incident. Courtiers whisper of her children, heirs to her throne, and you sense the weight she carries. Egypt's future rests on her shoulders. A kingdom teetering under Rome's shadow. You step back inside, drawn to a mosaic floor depicting the Nile, its waters teeming with fish and lotuses. Cleopatra's court mirrors this river, vibrant, complex, ever-flowing. Musicians play harps and flutes, their notes weaving through laughter, and you see her engage a philosopher, her question sharp. She wasn't just a seductress, she was a scholar, studying astronomy and medicine, her library rivaling any in the ancient world. You recall the hieroglyphs' tales, their scribes preserving knowledge like she does here. You'd love to borrow a scroll, but you'd probably return it with coffee stains. Oh wait, no coffee yet. You find a quiet corner, a cushioned bench by a window, and watch the lighthouse's beams sweep the night. The court's glamour is dazzling, but you sense its fragility. Rome's legions loom, and Cleopatra's charm is Egypt's last shield. You feel the Nile's pulse in the distance, its floods feeding this splendor, linking to the farmers and priests you've met. Her rule is a delicate dance, and you're glad you're just a visitor, not navigating this web of power. You smile, imagining her sneaking a nap between banquets, her crown askew. Even queens need a break. Right, the stars burn bright, and you lean back, the music lulling your thoughts. Cleopatra's court feels like a dream, its brilliance etched in gold and intrigue. You carry her story now, her defiance woven into the Nile's endless song. Let's slip away, following the river's call to where healers wield strange remedies. Section 11. Egyptian Medicine's Oddities. You glide away from Cleopatra's dazzling court, the palace's golden glow fading as you follow a torchlit path back toward the Nile. The night air is soft, scented with lotus blossoms and the faint musk of river mud, and the water's gentle ripples catch the moonlight like scattered pearls. You're in ancient Egypt, where life teeters on the edge of the divine and the practical. And tonight, you're stepping into the world of healers, whose remedies blend science, magic, and a few ingredients that might make you gag. Ahead, a mud brick house glows with lamplight, its door open to reveal a physician mixing herbs at a low table. You pose, catching the sharp tang of garlic and something suspiciously earthy. This is no modern clinic, and you'd better hope you don't need treatment, unless you're ready to swallow a potion fit for a crocodile. You step inside, the cool clay floor soothing your feet, and watch the physician grind a paste in a stone mortar. His hands steady despite the late hour. A patient sits nearby, clutching a bandaged arm, his face taut with pain. Around 1550 BCE. During the New Kingdom, Egyptian medicine was among the ancient world's most advanced, with physicians specializing in fields like surgery and dentistry. That's tonight's mainstream fact medical texts, like the Ebers Papyrus, listed over 700 remedies, from splints for fractures to herbal treatments for fevers. But here's a lesser-known detail. Some prescriptions included ingredients like crocodile dung or fly specks, believed to drive out evil spirits, causing illness. You wince, imagining the patient's face when handed a dung-based salve. Bet he'd trade it for a modern aspirin, faster than you can say, Sobek. The physician applies the paste to the man's arm, muttering a spell to Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of healing and destruction. You're struck by the blend of skill and faith. Egyptians saw illness as both physical and spiritual, caused by gods, demons, or bad air from the Nile's marshes. You recall the flood's magic from last night, its waters feeding the herbs in this mortar, tying healing to the river's pulse. The physician's tools, bronze scalpels, reed probes, linen bandages are surprisingly precise, and you're impressed by his steady hand. You'd probably faint at the sight of a needle, let alone try stitching a wound by lamplight. Historians still argue whether these magical spells were placebos or genuinely believed to work, likely both, since faith can move mountains, or at least soothe a fever. You glance at a shelf lined with jars of honey, willow bark, and dried mandrake. Honey was a star player, slathered on wounds to fight infection. A trick modern science confirms works. Willow bark, chewed for pain, was an early aspirin, and you can picture a patient grimacing at its bitter taste. But then there's the weirder stuff. Mouse tails for warts, or bat blood for eye complaints. You're tempted to ask the physician about his success rate, but you'd rather not hear about the time a patient spit out the bat, blood and cursed Thoth. The remedies reflect Egypt's world, where the Nile's creatures, like those sacred crocodiles, blur the line between medicine and myth. You're glad you're just visiting, not signing up for a dose of fly speck tea. You step outside. The night air, a relief after the chamber's pungent mix, and wander toward a small shrine to Imhotep, the deified physician whose wisdom guides healers. A woman leaves an offering of bread, her whisper thanking him for her child's recovery. Medicine wasn't just for the elite. Even farmers sought help from local healers, bartering grain for a poultice. You recall Thebes' bustling markets, their stalls tied to this web of care, and feel the community's strength. Priests often doubled as doctors, their temple schools, training men in anatomy and herbs. You nod at a passing priest-physician, his amulet glinting, but you'd probably mix up your mandrake and myrrh in his class. You pass a house where a dentist works, his patient wincing as he drills a cavity with a flint tool. Tooth pain was common, thanks to gritty bread wearing down enamel. And you're grateful for your modern toothbrush. Dentists used pastes of natron and mint to freshen breath. But for bad cases, they'd yank teeth with grim efficiency. You imagine the patient's relief, followed by a slurred complaint about the bill. Egyptian medicine wasn't perfect. Surgery was risky, and childbirth often deadly, but their knowledge saved lives. From setting bones to easing asthma with frankincense. You recall Cleopatra's court, her scholars studying these arts, and see the thread of learning woven through Egypt's story. You find a quiet spot by the Nile, its bank soft with reeds, and sit, watching the stars reflect on the water. A frog croaks nearby, and you smile, wondering if it's destined for a healer's jar. The physician's work lingers in your mind, a mix of skill and strangeness that kept Egypt healthy. You feel the river's flow, its waters feeding the herbs. The fields, the people you've met from farmers to queens, you're carrying their resilience now, their trust in remedies wild and wise. The night is calm, and you lean back, the Nile's murmur, a soothing thread. Let's drift on, following its call to where gods are celebrated with song. Section 12. Festivals of the Gods. You rise from the Nile's reedy bank. The physician's pungent remedies, fading as a warm breeze, carries the sound of drums and laughter. The morning sun bathes the river in gold, its waters glinting like a sacred offering, and the air hums with the scent of roasted barley and blooming jasmine. You're in ancient Egypt, where the gods are never far, and today, the people of Thebes are celebrating them with a festival that lights up the city. You follow a crowd streaming toward a temple square, their linen tunics bright with woven patterns, their voices rising in song. Banners flutter above, painted with images of Osiris and Hathor, and you feel the energy, a pulse of joy that binds the living to the divine. You're about to join the revelry, but keep an eye on your sandals, unless you want to lose them in a dance to honor a cow-headed goddess. You weave through the throng, dodging children, clutching lotus flowers, and men balancing trays of honeyed cakes. The square is alive, with color booths draped in red and blue, musicians plucking harps, and dancers swirling with ribbons. Around 1250 BCE, during the New Kingdom, festivals like the Opet celebration honored Amun-Ra, carrying his statue from Karnak to Luxor in a grand procession. That's tonight's mainstream fact. These festivals, tied to the Nile's flood or God's myths, strengthened Egypt's spiritual and social bonds, drawing thousands to worship and feast. But here's a lesser-known detail during the beautiful Festival of the Valley. Families picnicked in necropolises, toasting their ancestors with beer and bread to keep their souls happy. You grin, imagining a Theban sneaking an extra sip for himself, claiming it's for great grandpa's car. You pause by a booth where a woman offers cups of sweet beer, her smile wide as she praises Hathor, goddess of love and music. You accept a clay cup, its contents fizzy and thick, and take a cautious sip. It's more porridge than pint, but it warms your chest. The crowd cheers as priests carry a gilded statue of Osiris, his green face serene, symbolizing rebirth and the Nile's fertile flood you saw last night. You're tempted to join the chant, but you'd probably mumble the words and sound like a lost tourist. Festivals weren't just parties, they were sacred, ensuring the gods' favor for harvests and health. You recall the physician's spells, their magic echoing in these songs, tying faith to daily life. The procession moves toward the river, and you follow, the drumbeat quickening your pulse. Boats draped in garlands glide across the Nile, carrying statues of gods to visit their temples. The crowd tosses flowers into the water, their petals floating like prayers, and you feel the Nile's pulse, its flood fueling this joy. Historians still argue whether festivals were more about devotion or social control, letting pharaohs flaunt their piety. Probably both, since Egypt loved blending grandeur with grace. You chuckle, picturing a priest tripping over a garland, splashing into the Nile while clutching a sacred staff. Bet the crowd would call it a divine dunk. You join a dance circle, your feet clumsy on the packed earth, as women clap and sway, their anklets jingling. Hathor's spirit feels close, her laughter in every twirl, and you're swept into the rhythm, grinning despite your two left feet. Music fills the air flutes, drums, sistrums rattling like sacred maracas, and you're struck by the unity. Rich and poor, dancing as one. You recall Cleopatra's court, its elegance, a distant cousin to this raw celebration. Food stalls offer grilled fish and dates stuffed with almonds. And you're tempted to grab a handful, but you'd probably drop them mid-dance and start a food fight. You slip away to a theater corner, where families spread mats under acacia trees, sharing bread and wine. A grandfather tells a tale of Osiris's resurrection, his voice soft, and children listen wide-eyed, clutching amulets like the ones you saw in Thebes markets. Festivals strengthen these bonds, reminding Egyptians of their shared story. You nod, thinking of the mummy's afterlife dreams, their eternal feasts mirroring this earthly joy. Offerings pile high at a shrine to Isis, her statue draped in linen, and you're tempted to leave a flower, but you'd probably pick the wrong one and offend a goddess. Better stick to clapping. The sun climbs higher, and you find a spot by the Nile, its banks soft with grass. To watch the boats return, priests chant from the decks, their voices carrying over the water, and the crowd kneels, their prayers a wave of gratitude. The festival honors the Nile's flood, the fields it feeds, the lives it sustains. Everything you've seen, from farmers to pharaohs, weaves back to this river. You feel its magic, a thread tying Egypt's heart to the heavens. You're just a visitor, but you carry their songs now, their faith in gods who dance with mortals. The day's heat wraps around you, and you lean back. The Nile's murmur, a gentle lull. Let's keep moving, following its call to where warriors guard the land. Section 13. Warriors of the Sands. You drift away from the festival's vibrant hum, the Nile's glittering waters, and the crowd's joyful chants fading as you follow a dusty trail into the desert's embrace. The afternoon sun blazes overhead, its heat pressing against your skin, and the air carries the dry scent of sand and distant acacia. You're in ancient Egypt, where the Nile's bounty must be protected. And tonight, you're stepping into the world of warriors, men who guard the land with bronze and courage. Ahead, a military camp sprawls across the dunes, its tents flapping in the breeze, the clink of spears and shields echoing like a heartbeat. You pose, spotting archers practicing under a commander's sharp gaze, their arrows slicing the air. You're about to join Egypt's defenders, but keep your head down, unless you want to be drafted into a march across the scorching sands. You approach the camp, your sandals crunching on the gravel, and weave through rows of soldiers polishing their weapons. The air smells of leather and oil, and you catch the low murmur of men swapping stories of battles past. Around 1479 BCE, during the New Kingdom, Pharaoh Thutmose III expanded Egypt's empire, leading campaigns into Nubia and Syria to secure trade routes and tribute. That's tonight's mainstream fact. Thutmose III, dubbed Egypt's Napoleon, won 17 military campaigns, making Egypt a superpower through disciplined armies. But here's a lesser-known detail. Egyptian soldiers often carried amulets of Sekhmet, the lioness goddess of war, believing her ferocity would shield them in battle. You grin, imagining a burly warrior clutching a tiny Sekhmet charm, praying it's stronger than his rusty dagger. Bet you'd hide behind a chariot at the first sign of trouble. You pause by an archer, knocking an arrow, his bow taut as he aims at a straw target. His muscles flex, and the arrow flies true, thudding into the mark. Archers were Egypt's elite, their composite bows outranging enemies. And you're impressed by the skill. You'd probably shoot your own foot and earn a laugh from the squad. The army wasn't just nobles. It included farmers recruited during the flood season, when fields lay underwater. You recall the Nile's inundation, its silt feeding the men who now wield these weapons, tying their strength to the river's pulse. Soldiers trained hard, marching in formation, wielding khopesh swords, curved blades that gleamed wickedly in the sun. You're glad you're just visiting, not swinging one in a sweaty drill. You move to a chariot platform, where a driver oils the wheels of a lightweight rig. It's wood, polished to a sheen. Chariots, introduced by the Hyksos around 1650 BCE, were Egypt's secret weapon, speeding across battlefields, with archers firing from the back. You can picture Thutmose III charging into Canaan, his chariot kicking up dust, enemies scattering like startled birds. Historians still argue whether chariots were more about shock value or actual combat power, probably both. Since nothing says surrender like a horse-drawn missile platform, you chuckle, imagining a driver cursing, a wobbly wheel mid-charge, hoping Ra's watching his back. You'd rather stick to walking. Thanks. You pass a tent where a commander briefs his men, pointing to a papyrus map of Nubia's rocky hills. The soldiers nod, their faces set, and you feel the weight of their duty protecting Egypt's gold mines and trade routes from raiders. You recall Cleopatra's dazzling court, its wealth built on this security, and see the warriors' role in Egypt's story. They weren't just fighters, they were builders too, digging canals or hauling stone for temples when not at war. You're awed by their grit. But you'd probably drop a limestone block on your toe and retire early. The camp hums with purpose, and you notice amulets glinting at necks. Tying these men to the festival's gods and the mummy's afterlife dreams, you find a quiet spot by a campfire, its embers glowing as soldiers share bread and dried fish. The scent of smoke mingles with their low laughter, and you listen to a tale of a skirmish where Sekhmet's roar turned the tide. Faith runs deep here. Every victory, a gift from the gods. Every loss, a test. Priests travel with the army, offering prayers to Horus before battles. And you recall Karnak's chants, their echoes in these desert rites. You're tempted to join the storytelling, but your modern war movies wouldn't impress this crowd. You imagine boasting about Wi-Fi battles, only to get blank stares. You wander to the camp's edge, where sentries scan the horizon, their spears catching the fading sun. The desert stretches vast and silent, hiding threats in its folds. Libyan tribes, Hittite scouts, or bandits eyeing Egypt's riches. You feel a shiver, not from the cooling air, but from the stakes these men face. Their victories fed the Nile's trade, the markets of Thebes, the pharaoh's golden throne. You nod at a sentry, his gaze steady, and think of the hieroglyphs carving their deeds into stone. The warrior's courage is Egypt's shield, and you're glad you're not facing a Hittite spearhead at dawn. You sit on a dune, the sand still warm, and watch the stars emerge, sharp as arrowheads. The camp's fires flicker below, a constellation of human will against the desert's dark. You carry the warrior's story now, their sweat and faith woven into the Nile's endless flow. The night wraps around you. It's quiet, a soft embrace, and you feel Egypt's strength, forged in battle and bound by river and gods. Let's keep moving, following the Nile's call to where trade trails blaze across the sands. Section 14. Trade on desert trails. You slip away from the warrior's camp. The desert's quiet, swallowing the clink of spears as you follow a starlit trail away from the Nile. The night air is cool, scented with dry sage and the faint musk of camel dung, and the sand shifts softly under your sandals. You're in ancient Egypt, where the river's wealth flows beyond its banks, carried by traders who brave scorching trails to bring treasures from distant lands. Ahead, a caravan stretches across the dunes, its camels swaying under loads of ebony and myrrh, their bells jingling in the stillness. You fall in step beside a merchant, his face weathered but eyes sharp, and feel the pulse of commerce that binds Egypt to the world. You're about to join this desert journey, but keep your water skin close. unless you want to barter your sandals for a sip in the middle of nowhere. You adjust your pace to match the caravan's rhythm. The camel's grunts and the creak of wooden packs filling the air. The merchant nods at you, his turban catching the moonlight, and points to a bundle of frankincense. Its resinous scent heavy even through the cloth. Around 1500 BCE, during the New Kingdom, Egypt's trade networks thrived, linking the Nile to lands like Punt, Nubia, and the Levant through desert and sea routes. That's tonight's mainstream fact trade brought gold, ivory, and spices to Egypt, fueling its wealth and the pharaoh's dazzling courts you glimpsed with Cleopatra. But here's a lesser-known detail. Traders used donkey caravans before camels became common, with hundreds of animals carrying goods across brutal terrains, sometimes guided by star maps etched on clay. You grin, imagining a donkey stubbornly refusing to move, leaving a merchant cursing under the stars. Bet you'd lose patience faster than a Wi-Fi signal in a sandstorm. You grip the rope of a camel, its coarse hair rough under your palms, and scan the horizon for landmarks. A lone acacia, a rocky outcrop. The desert is no joke. One wrong turn, and you're a vulture's lunch. Traders like your companion know these trails by heart, navigating by constellations like Orion, which you recall from the pyramid builders' starlit nights. You're impressed by their grit, but you'd probably misread the stars and end up in a dune pile. The caravan carries treasures. Egypt craves turquoise from Sinai, cedar from Lebanon, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, all destined for temples and tombs. You think of the mummies' canopic jars. They're stone carved from these far-off mines, tying trade to the afterlife's dreams. You pass a trader bartering with a Bedouin guide, offering a bronze dagger for water and directions. The haggling is fierce, their voices rising over the camels' snorts, and you're tempted to chime in, but you'd probably trade your cloak for a fake map. Trade wasn't just goods, it was diplomacy, with pharaohs sending gifts to foreign kings to seal alliances. Historians still argue whether these exchanges were equal or if Egypt flexed its wealth to dominate, likely both. Since nobody says no to a golden statue from Thebes, you chuckle, picturing a trader overselling a sack of myrrh, claiming it's pharaoh-approved. You'd fall for it, then realize it's just fancy tree sap. The trail climbs a ridge, and you pause, breathless, to see the caravan snake across the dunes below, its torches flickering like a river of fire. The merchant shares a strip of dried fish, its salt sharp on your tongue, and tells of Punt, a land of incense trees and leopard skins, reached by sea via the Red Coast. You recall the Nile's trade boats in Thebes, their sails fed by the same river that funds this journey. Traders faced pirates, storms, and bandits, yet their hauls built Egypt's glory, from Karnak's columns to Cleopatra's silks. You're awed by their daring, but you're glad you're not dodging arrows for a sack of spices. Your office chair sounds divine right now. You descend into a wadi, where a small oasis offers relief, a cluster of date palms and a muddy spring. The caravan halts, camels kneeling with groans, and traders unpack to rest. The air smells of ripe dates and smoke as a fire crackles, and you sit on a woven mat, listening to tales of distant markets. One trader boasts of trading Nubian gold for Hittite horses, his hands waving like he's conjuring the deal. You recall the warriors' chariots, their wheels rolling thanks to these trades, and see Egypt's web of connections. You'd love to swap stories, but your tale of online shopping wouldn't impress this crowd. 2-day shipping, they'd scoff. You notice an amulet at the merchant's neck, a wedge-at eye to ward off evil, and think of the festival's prayers to Isis. Traders carried faith across borders, leaving offerings at desert shrines to Bes or Hathor for safe passage. You're tempted to leave a pebble for luck, but you'd probably pick one that's cursed by mistake. The night deepens, stars blazing like the lighthouse in Alexandria, and you feel the desert's vastness, a silent partner in Egypt's trade. The caravan's bells tie back to the Nile's pulse, its wealth flowing through these sands to feed pharaohs and gods. You lean back against a palm, the sand cool beneath you, and watch the fire's embers dance. The traders' voices lull you, their stories weaving a tapestry of risk and reward. You carry their journey now, their courage etched into the Nile's endless song. The desert's quiet wraps you tight, and you feel Egypt's heartbeat, pulsing through trails and rivers. Let's keep wandering, following the Nile's call to where a sphinx guards its secrets. Section 15. Mysteries of the Sphinx. You slip away from the caravan's flickering fires, the desert's vast silence swallowing the traders' tales as you follow a moonlit path back toward the Nile. The air is crisp, scented with dry sand and the faint whisper of tamarisk, and the stars burn bright, guiding your steps like they did the merchants' camels. You're in ancient Egypt, where the land holds secrets older than pharaohs. And tonight, you're approaching the Giza Plateau, where the great Sphinx crouches, its lion's body and human face gazing into eternity. The pyramids loom nearby, their silhouettes sharp against the night. But it's the Sphinx that draws you, its weathered stone radiating mystery. You pose, feeling its silent question, and wonder if you're ready for its riddles. Just don't stare too long, unless you want to be quizzed by a statue that's been stumping scholars for millennia. You step closer, the sand soft under your sandals, and stand before the Sphinx, its massive paws stretching out like guardians of time. The air feels heavy, as if the stone itself holds its breath, and you trace the faint scars of erosion on its flanks. Around 2500 BCE, during the Old Kingdom, Pharaoh Khafre likely commissioned the Sphinx, carved from a single limestone outcrop to watch over his pyramid. That's tonight's mainstream fact: the Great Sphinx, 73 meters long and 20 meters high, is one of the world's oldest monumental sculptures, a symbol of royal power and divine protection. But here's a lesser-known detail: the Sphinx once had a beard, fragments of which were found buried in the sand, possibly added to mimic the pharaoh's ceremonial false beards you saw in Memphis. You grin, imagining a worker chiseling a beard onto this giant catman, hoping it doesn't fall off mid-ceremony. Bet you'd drop the hammer and run for cover. You circle the Sphinx, its eyes fixed on the horizon, and feel a shiver, not from the cool night, but from its timeless gaze. Egyptians called it Horemheb, meaning Horus of the horizon, linking it to the sun god and the pharaoh's divine rule. You recall the warriors' Sekhmet amulets, their faith echoing in this sacred guardian. The Sphinx's nose is missing, chipped away long after Egypt's glory, and you can't help but wonder who dared deface it. Legends blame invaders, but no one knows for sure. Historians still argue whether the Sphinx was built solely for Khafre or served a broader spiritual purpose. Like marking a sacred site, probably both, since Egypt loved layering meaning into every stone. You chuckle, picturing a priest explaining the nose's loss as a cosmic sign, while workers just shrug and blame bad chisels. You sit on a low rock, the Sphinx's shadow pooling around you, and study its weathered face. Wind and water have softened its features, hinting at a wetter past when Giza wasn't all dunes. Some say it's older than the pyramids, carved by a lost civilization, but most scholars scoff at that. You're tempted to dig for clues, but you'd probably unearth a scorpion and sprint back to Thebes. The Sphinx guarded tombs, its presence warding off evil, much like the hieroglyphs' curses you traced nights ago. Tombs nearby held nobles, their graves tied to the pharaoh's eternity. And you feel the weight of their dreams, woven into the Nile's pulse that fed this land. You notice a stela between the Sphinx's paws, carved with a tale of Thutmose IV, who, as a prince, napped in its shade and dreamed. The Sphinx promised him the throne if he cleared its buried sand. He did, and became pharaoh, proving the statue's power, or at least its knack for good PR. You recall the festival's prayers, their faith in gods who speak through stone, and nod, impressed by the story's pull. You'd love to nap here too, but you'd probably wake up with a sunburn and no crown. The stela's glyphs glow faintly in torchlight, tying back to the scribe's magic, their words binding earth to sky. You wander to the Sphinx's side, where priests once burned incense at dawn, their chants rising with the sun. The air still holds a faint myrrh scent, and you imagine Horus's spirit soaring from this stone, guarding Egypt's heart. The Sphinx was more than a statue, it was a riddle. Its silence, asking what it means to endure. You think of Cleopatra's court, its brilliance fading under Rome's shadow, and see the Sphinx's gaze outlasting empires. You're awed by its resilience, but you're glad you're not scrubbing sand off it in the heat. Your modern couch sounds like a throne right now. You find a quiet spot by the enclosure's edge, the sand cool beneath you, and gaze at the Sphinx, its profile sharp against the pyramid's bulk. The night is still, broken only by a distant owl's call, and you feel the plateau's ancient pulse, linking farmers, pharaohs, and traders you've met. The Sphinx holds their stories, its mystery, a silent song that echoes the Nile's flow. You're just a visitor, but you carry its question now, a whisper of eternity in your dreams. The stars wheel overhead, and you lean back. The desert's calm, a gentle cradle. Let's keep drifting, following the Nile's call to where scribes wield quiet power. Section 16. Scribes' quiet power. You ease away from the Sphinx's enigmatic gaze, its stone silhouette fading into the Giza night as you follow a starlit path back toward the Nile. The air is cool, scented with river reeds and the faint warmth of sun-baked earth, and the water's soft ripples murmur like a distant lullaby. You're in ancient Egypt, where words hold as much power as swords. And tonight, you're stepping into the world of scribes, the silent architects of Egypt's legacy. You approach a quiet quarter of Thebes, where a mud brick school glows with lamplight, its open courtyard alive with the scratch of reed pens on papyrus. You pose, catching the faint scent of ink and clay, and feel the weight of knowledge that shapes Pharaoh's decrees and God's praises. You're about to join these keepers of Egypt's voice, but don't smudge their scrolls, unless you want to rewrite a tax list as punishment. You step into the courtyard, the cool tiles soothing your feet, and watch a young scribe, barely older than a teenager, hunch over a papyrus sheet, his pen tracing glyphs with careful strokes. His lamp flickers, casting shadows on his focused face, and you're struck by the precision of his craft. Around 2500 BCE, during the Old Kingdom, scribes became Egypt's backbone, recording everything from grain tallies to royal edicts in hieroglyphs and hieratic script. That's tonight's mainstream fact scribes were an elite class, their literacy rare in a largely illiterate society, making them indispensable to pharaohs and temples. But here's a lesser-known detail: scribe schools, called houses of life, doubled as libraries, preserving medical texts, star charts, and even love poems alongside tax records. You grin, imagining a scribe sneaking a romantic verse between grain counts, hoping his teacher doesn't notice. Bet you doodle in the margins and get detention. You sit on a low bench, the night's quiet wrapping around you, and observe the students. Their tablets littered with practice signs, anks, owls, reeds. Their teacher, an older scribe with ink-stained fingers, corrects a boy's shaky falcon glyph, his voice firm but kind. Scribes trained for years, mastering hundreds of symbols, their hands cramped from endless drills. You're impressed by their dedication, but you'd probably spill ink all over the papyrus and ruin a sacred hymn. Scribes weren't just clerks, they were trusted advisors, drafting laws, tracking the Nile's flood levels you saw, and carving the pharaoh's deeds into stone. Like the Sphinx's stealer, you recall the traders' desert trails, their goods tallied by these pens, tying scribes to Egypt's wealth. You glance at a finished scroll, its columns neat as a pharaoh's throne room, recording a temple's offerings to Amun-Ra. The glyphs are tiny spells, ensuring divine favor, and you're reminded of the festival's chants, their prayers etched by these hands. Scribes wielded quiet power, their words shaping history, while warriors swung swords. Historians still argue whether scribes were more bureaucrats or priests. Given their temple ties, probably both, since Egypt blurred the sacred and the practical like nobody's business. You chuckle, picturing a scribe grumbling over a tax audit, only to find a sacred cat napping on his scroll. Good luck, shooing that furry deity without a curse. You wander to a corner where a senior scribe works alone, his papyrus spread with a star chart, plotting Sirius's rise to predict the Nile's flood. His quill scratches softly, and you're awed by the science woven into his art. Scribes mapped the heavens, guided builders of pyramids, and preserved the medical remedies you smelled in the healer's hut. Their schools were Egypt's memory, safeguarding knowledge through wars and droughts. You recall Cleopatra's scholarly court, its library fed by these traditions, and see the scribe's legacy stretching across time. You'd love to peek at his chart, but you'd probably misread it and predict a meteor shower by mistake. You step outside, the night air, a relief after the courtyard's inky warmth, and pass a small shrine to Thoth, the ibis-headed god of writing. A clay tablet lies as an offering, etched with a student's practice glyphs, and you nod, respecting their devotion. Scribes were Thoth's servants, their work a sacred act, tying back to the hieroglyphs' magic you traced nights ago. They wrote for pharaohs, gods, and eternity, their pens stronger than any spear you saw in the warrior's camp. You're tempted to leave a pencil as a modern tribute, but you'd rather not confuse Thoth with your bad handwriting. You find a quiet spot by the Nile, its banks soft with grass, and sit, watching the river reflect the stars like a scribe's ink on papyrus. The school's lamplight glows behind you, a beacon of Egypt's mind, and you feel the scribe's power, their words weaving farmers, pharaohs, and gods into one story. You carry their silence now, their steady hands etched into the Nile's endless flow. The night is calm, the river's murmur, a gentle thread, and you lean back, the stars above sharp as glyphs. Let's keep wandering, following the Nile's call to where love blooms under the sky. Section 17. Love and Family Bonds. You drift away from the scribe's quiet courtyard, the soft scratch of their pens fading as you follow a moonlit path along the Nile. The air is warm, scented with lotus flowers and the gentle musk of river silt, and the water's ripples catch the stars like a lover's whispered promise. You're in ancient Egypt, where the heart beats as strongly as the Nile's current, and tonight, you're stepping into a world of love and family, where bonds tie tighter than any pharaoh's decree. Ahead, a village glows with torchlight, its mud brick homes alive with laughter and the clink of clay cups. You pose, drawn to a courtyard where a wedding feast unfolds. garlands of jasmine draping the air with sweetness. You're about to join this celebration of devotion. But don't trip over the bride's veil. Unless you want to be the talk of Thebes by sunrise, you slip into the courtyard, the packed earth warm under your sandals, and weave through a crowd of villagers, their faces lit with joy. A young couple stands beneath a canopy of woven reeds, their hands clasped, their linen robes shimmering with embroidered stars. Around 1350 BCE, during the New Kingdom, marriage in Egypt was a practical yet heartfelt bond, often sealed without grand ceremonies but celebrated with feasts like this. That's tonight's mainstream fact. Egyptians married young, often in their teens, forming families that were the backbone of society, from farmers to nobles. But here's a lesser-known detail: love poems, written on papyrus by scribes you met last night, reveal deep passion, with lovers comparing their beloveds to lotuses or gazelles, sometimes even sneaking off for secret Nile-side trysts. You grin, imagining a poet scribbling a steamy verse, hoping his crush doesn't catch him blushing. Bet you'd fumble a modern love text worse than a hieroglyphic sonnet. You pause by a table, laden with bread, dates, and jars of honeyed wine, the air thick with roasted duck and cumin. A woman offers you a cup, her smile warm, and you sip the sweet wine, its warmth spreading through you. The bride's laughter rings out as her groom whispers something, and you're struck by their ease. Marriage here was a partnership, with women holding rights to property and divorce. You recall the Nile's flood, its bounty, feeding these feasts, tying love to the river's pulse. You'd love to toast the couple, but you'd probably spill wine on the groom's tunic and start a family feud. The crowd claps as musicians strum lyres, their notes weaving through the chatter, and you feel the village's heart, bound by shared joy. You move to Akita Corner, where elders share stories of their own weddings, their voices soft with memory. Children dart between them, clutching clay dolls, and you notice their amulets, tiny anks for life, wedge-at eyes for protection. Family wasn't just parents and kids, it included grandparents, aunts, even beloved pets, like the sacred cats you saw in Thebes markets. Egyptians cherished their kin, naming children after ancestors to keep their spirits alive. Much like the mummy's afterlife dreams, historians still argue whether love or economics drove most marriages, likely both. Since a good match meant full granaries and happy hearts, you chuckle, picturing a mother nudging her son toward a wealthy bride, muttering about her father's barley fields. You'd probably pick love and end up with a poet's empty wallet. You wander to the Nile's edge, where the couple exchanges vows, their words drowned by the river's murmur, but clear in their gazes. A priest of Hathor, goddess of love, blesses them, scattering lotus petals, and you recall the festival's dances, her spirit alive in this moment. Women had power in love, often choosing their partners, and could walk away if the spark faded, taking their dowry with them. You're impressed by their freedom, but you'd probably botch a proposal, offering a wilted lotus instead of a ring. The village joins hands, singing a hymn to Isis, mother and protector, and you feel the warmth of their unity. A family woven by river and gods. You find a spot by a mud brick wall, its surface cool against your back, and watch the feast unfold. Torches cast golden light on dancers, their shadows swaying like reeds, and a grandmother braids a girl's hair, whispering tales of young love. Families work together, farming fields or crafting goods, their lives tied to the Nile's flow you saw with the traders' caravans. Children learned from parents, girls weaving linen, boys tending goats, and you think of the scribes' schools, Their lessons rooted in this love. You're tempted to join the dance, but your modern moves might scare the sacred geese waddling nearby. You glance at the stars, sharp above the village, and feel Egypt's heartbeat in this celebration. Love wasn't just poetry, it was survival. Raising children to carry the Nile's story. From pyramids to Cleopatra's court, you recall the Sphinx's silent gaze. Its mystery echoed in these human bonds, enduring beyond stone. You're just a visitor, but you carry their warmth now, their vows woven into the river's song. The night deepens, the feast's laughter, a gentle lull, and you lean back, the Nile's murmur cradling your thoughts. Let's keep drifting, following its call to where an empire begins to fade. Section: the 18th of December, line of an empire. You slip away from the wedding's warm glow, the village's laughter fading as you follow a twilight path along the Nile. The air is heavy, scented with river reeds and the faint tang of cooling earth, and the water's ripples catch the fading sun like whispers of a world in flux. You're in ancient Egypt, where the Nile's pulse has carried pharaohs and farmers for millennia. But tonight, you're stepping into a time of shadows, where cracks begin to show in the kingdom's golden facade. You approach a crumbling fort near Memphis, its mud-brick walls sagging under years of neglect, the clink of a lone sentry's spear echoing in the dusk. You pose, feeling the weight of an empire teetering, its glory dimming like the day's last light. You're about to witness Egypt's decline, but tread lightly. Unless you want to dodge a falling brick or a grumpy guard's glare, you lean against the fort's gate, the stone rough under your palms, and survey the quiet plain beyond, where fields lie half-tended and canals clog with silt. The fort's soldiers, their armor patched, share a meager meal of barley bread, their voices low with worry. Around 1070 BCE, during the Third Intermediate Period, Egypt's New Kingdom's splendor began to fade, splintering into rival factions ruled by weakened pharaohs and powerful priests. That's tonight's mainstream fact. Internal strife and economic woes eroded Egypt's unity, leaving it vulnerable to foreign invaders like the Libyans and Nubians. But here's a lesser-known detail. Tomb robberies surged during this time, with even royal mummies looted for gold, their sacred rest disturbed by desperate locals. You grimace, imagining a thief prying open a sarcophagus, hoping Anubis isn't watching. Bet you'd stick to scavenging for lost sandals instead. You wander inside the fort, the air thick with dust and the faint smell of sour beer. A scribe, his papyrus tattered, records a dwindling grain supply, his quill trembling. Egypt's wealth, once fed by the Nile's floods, you saw, now falters poor harvests. Trade routes, disrupted by bandits, and taxes hoarded by local lords. You recall the traders' desert trails, their caravans thriving on Egypt's strength, now reduced to wary donkey treks. The scribe mutters about a priest-king in Thebes defying the pharaoh, and you're struck by the fracture pharaohs, once divine like those in Memphis, now bicker like rival neighbors. You'd try to mediate, but you'd probably trip over a scroll and start a diplomatic incident. You step onto a crumbling rampart, the Nile glinting below, its flow steady but unable to heal the land's wounds. Foreign threats loom, sea peoples ravaging coasts, Libyans infiltrating the delta and Egypt's armies, once mighty like Thutmose III's warriors, are stretched thin. You recall the Sphinx's gaze, its timeless watch over a kingdom now faltering, and feel a pang for its silent vigil. Historians still argue whether climate shifts, with weaker Nile floods, tipped the scales, or if corruption was the true culprit, likely both. Since nature and greed make a nasty team, you chuckle, picturing a governor blaming the gods for his embezzled gold. While farmers roll their eyes, you'd hide your grain too, hoping the taxman skips your hut. You pass a shrine to Amun-Ra, its altar bare of offerings, and notice a soldier praying, his Sekhmet amulet clutched tight. Faith persists, tying back to the festival's songs. But temples like Karnak now hoard wealth, their priests rivaling pharaohs. You're tempted to leave a pebble for luck, but you'd rather not anger a god who's already got enough on his plate. The fort's decay mirrors Egypt's once a shield, now a relic. Its walls, no match for the chaos creeping in. You think of Cleopatra's court, her brilliance, a final flare before Rome's shadow, and see the long arc of decline beginning here. Centuries earlier, you find a quiet spot by the riverbank, the grass patchy but soft, and sit, watching the Nile's current carry a stray lotus petal. A fisherman nearby hauls a small net, his catch meager, and you sense the struggle etched in his slumped shoulders. Familias still farm. Love and pray, like those at the wedding, but hope frays under hunger and unrest. You recall the scribes' glyphs, their tales of glory now fading on neglected stele, and feel Egypt's heartbeat slowing. The river flows on, linking farmers, pharaohs, and gods, but its magic can't mend a kingdom pulling itself apart. You're glad you're just a visitor, not bartering your last loaf for a guard's protection. You glance at the stars, their light cold and distant, and think of the mummy's afterlife dreams, their eternal fields untouched by this earthly decay. Egypt's story isn't over new rulers. Like the Nubians, will rise, bringing fresh chapters, but the golden age dims. Its light, soft as the twilight around you. You carry the empire's weight now, its triumphs and troubles woven into the Nile's endless song. The night settles, the fort's silhouette, a quiet sentinel, and you lean back, the river's murmur, a faint comfort. Let's keep drifting, following its call to where Egypt's legacy lingers in the sands. Section 19. Legacy in the Sands. You rise from the crumbling fort's shadow, the Nile's steady murmur, fading as you follow a windswept path into the desert's embrace. The twilight air is cool, scented with dry sand and the faint whisper of tamarisk. And the stars begin to prick the sky, sharp as the hieroglyphs you once traced. You're in ancient Egypt, where time has worn down empires, but left echoes in stone and story. And tonight, you're wandering through the ruins that hold Egypt's enduring legacy. Ahead, a broken obelisk juts from the dunes, its carvings half buried. And beyond it, the faint outline of a collapsed temple shimmers in the moonlight. You pose, feeling the weight of millennia, the voices of pharaohs, farmers, and scribes lingering in the silence. You're about to explore what Egypt left behind. But watch your step, unless you want to stub your toe on a relic and wake a sleeping god. You approach the obelisk, its granite warm under your fingers, and brush sand from a faded cartouche. The name of a forgotten pharaoh barely legible. Around 30 BCE, with Cleopatra's death, Egypt fell to Rome, marking the end of its independence. But its culture, art, science, the religion shaped the world for centuries beyond. That's tonight's mainstream fact: Egypt's legacy. From its calendar to its architecture, influenced Greek, Roman, and even modern civilizations, with obelisks standing in cities like Rome and Paris today. But here's a lesser-known detail: the Coptic language, descended from ancient Egyptian, was spoken into the Middle Ages, preserving words like Ka and Ba from the mummy's afterlife dreams you saw. You grin, imagining a Coptic monk muttering an ancient curse when his sandal breaks, linking him to the scribe's papyrus. Bet you'd butcher the pronunciation and sound like a tourist. You wander deeper into the ruins, the sand crunching softly, and pass a toppled statue of Ra, its falcon head cracked but still proud. The wind hums through the stones, and you're struck by Egypt's resilience. Its temples, like Karnak, stood through invasions, their glyphs telling tales of gods and floods you witnessed. Egypt's ideas traveled far. Its 365-day calendar shaped ours. Its medicine inspired Greek healers, and its myths wove into early Christian stories. You recall the festival's hymns to Isis, her love echoing in later tales of Mary. You'd love to claim credit for a calendar tweak, but you'd probably add an extra day for napping and throw off the seasons. You step into the temple's remains, its columns leaning like weary giants, and trace a relief of Anubis guiding a soul. The art is faded, yet its grace endures, inspiring artists across time. From Roman frescoes to Renaissance tombs, historians still argue whether Egypt's influence was willingly adopted or plundered by conquerors, likely both, since ideas flow like the Nile, hard to contain. You chuckle, picturing a Roman sculptor copying an Ankh, claiming it's all the rage in Memphis. You'd probably sketch a lopsided sphinx and call it modern art, only to be laughed out of Alexandria. You find a shard of pottery, its blue glaze catching the moonlight, and think of Thebes' markets, their wares tied to the Nile's clay. Egypt's crafts glass, faience, linen set standards for beauty, traded along the desert trails you walked with merchants. Its engineer, who built pyramids and nilometers, taught the world precision, their tools guiding the warriors' chariots and scribes' star charts. You're awed by the web of knowledge, but you're glad you're not hauling limestone to prove it. Your modern calculator feels like a gift from Thoth right now. You pause by a dry canal, its banks crumbling, and recall the flood's magic. Its silt feeding the fields that fueled Egypt's glory. The Nile's pulse runs through every ruin, linking farmers' hoes to Cleopatra's silks, mummies' amulets to festival songs. Egypt's decline, seen in that sagging fort, didn't erase its mark. The Sphinx still gazes. The pyramids stand, and hieroglyphs speak through the Rosetta Stone's key. You think of the love vows sworn under starlight, their tenderness outlasting empires. You're tempted to pocket the pottery shard, but you'd rather not tempt a curse from a grumpy car. You sit on a fallen column, the stone cool against your back, and watch the desert stretch into darkness. A jackal howls, its cry sharp, and you nod, sensing Anubis's shadow in these sands. Egypt's legacy isn't just stone, it's the human spirit, resilient, curious, faithful, woven into every story you've carried. From pharaohs' thrones to scribes' pens, you feel the Nile's distant flow, its eternal song tying past to present, and you're grateful to walk its echoes. A visitor in a land that shaped time. The stars burn brighter, and you lean back. The desert's quiet, a soft embrace. Let's drift on, following the Nile's call to a final rest by its waters. Section 20. Drifting to sleep. You rise from the temple's broken stones, the desert's quiet legacy fading as you follow a gentle path back to the Nile's embrace. The night air is soft, scented with river reeds and the faint sweetness of blooming lotus, and the water's ripples gleam under a canopy of stars, each one a whisper from Egypt's ancient heart. You're in the final moments of your journey through this land of pharaohs and farmers, where the Nile has carried you from pyramids to festivals, scribes to sphinxes. Tonight, you settle by the river's edge, its murmur, a soothing lullaby, ready to let Egypt's stories cradle you into dreams. You're home in this timeless flow. But don't drift too far, unless you want to wake up debating hieroglyphs with a sacred crocodile. You find a grassy bank, the earth cool and yielding beneath you, and sit, letting the Nile's rhythm wash over your thoughts. The river stretches before you, its waters silver in the moonlight, a lifeline that fed the fields you saw, the markets of Thebes, the golden court of Cleopatra. Around 3100 BCE, Egypt's story began with the unification under Menes, a tale you started with, and its legacy endures in every stone and star you've touched. That's tonight's mainstream fact: the Nile, more than any pharaoh or god, was Egypt's soul, sustaining a civilization that shaped history for millennia. But here's a lesser-known detail. Egyptians believed the Nile flowed from the underworld, its source, a mystery guarded by gods, a sacred stream, linking life to eternity. You smile, imagining a priest pondering its origins. Then, shrugging and offering a loaf to Happy. Bet you just Google it and call it a night. You lean back, your hands brushing the grass, and watch a heron glide across the river, its wings silent as a scribe's pen. The Nile's song ties every moment you've lived here, the flood's black silt, the warriors' dusty camps, the love vows sworn under jasmine. You recall the Sphinx's gaze, its riddle outlasting empires, and feel Egypt's pulse in this quiet moment, a heartbeat woven through ruins and dreams. Historians still argue whether the Nile's magic was divine or simply nature's gift, likely both, since Egypt saw gods in every ripple and reed. You chuckle, picturing a farmer thanking the river for fish, then cursing when his net snags a lotus. You'd probably trip into the water, flailing like a bad festival dancer. You shift, stretching out on the bank, and let your eyes trace the stars, sharp as the glyphs that told Egypt's tales. They're the same stars the pyramid builders mapped, the scribes charted, the lovers wished upon, and you feel a connection, their hopes echoing your own. The Nile's murmur grows softer, a melody of memory, and you think of the mummy's afterlife fields, their eternal harvests, mirroring the river's gifts. You're grateful for this journey, from the pharaoh's throne to the healer's pungent jars, each step a thread in the Nile's tapestry. You'd love to stay, but your modern bed calls, far cozier than a mud brick roof. The night deepens, the air wrapping you like a linen cloak, and you close your eyes, letting the river's voice fill your mind. The Nile flows on, carrying Egypt's stories through time, from Menes's crown to Cleopatra's final stand, from the festival songs to the traders' desert bells. You carry them too, their resilience and wonder woven into your dreams. A gift from a land where gods and mortals walk together. The stars fade behind your lids, and you feel the river's gentle pull, easing you towards sleep. Its waters, a cradle for your weary soul. Your breath slows, each exhale softer, and the Nile's murmur blends with your heartbeat, a quiet rhythm that holds you safe. The lotus scent lingers, the heron's shadow, a fleeting dream, and you sink deeper. The desert's silence, a warm embrace. Egypt's voices, farmers' laughter, priests' chants, lovers' whispers fade into a single note, a lullaby of eternity. You're home by the river, its flow, your guide, and you let go, drifting into a world where stars sail like Ra's boat, where the Nile never ends. Sleep comes, gentle as a lotus, closing at dusk, and you rest, cradled by Egypt's timeless song,